What the hell is that? Sounds almost like
ice cream?
You can't be fucking serious, right?
Old Zip Coon, he's a learned scholar. Old Zip Coon, he's a learned scholar. Old Zip Coon, he's a learned scholar. Sings possum up a gum tree and Cooney in the holler. Possum up a gum tree, Cooney on a stump. Possum up a gum tree, Cooney on a stump. Possum up a gum tree, Cooney on a stump. Then over double trouble, Zip Coon will jump.
Old Zip Coon, he's a learned scholar. Old Zip Coon, he's a learned scholar. Old Zip Coon, he's a learned scholar. Sings possum up the gum tree, Cooney and the holler.
Have you forgotten that once we were brought here, we were robbed of our name, robbed of our language. We lost our religion, our culture, our God. And many of us, by the way we act, we even lost our mind. know what this world is coming to.
Raising the wrong question. We keep asking, why do black men hang on corners? Why do black men lack direction? Well, if you ask this question, you answer the question 18 to 30 years too late. It is not a conspiracy to destroy black men. It's a conspiracy to destroy black boys. If you destroy him as a boy, he'll never become a man. There needs to be some men in our children's lives. I want to explain to me how a boy is going to grow up to be a man if he's never seen any. In order to be anything, you must see it first. Remember in the earlier workshop, and I'll go through this very quickly, from the University of Michigan, we wanted to find out what the major influence on children. We said 1950 it was home, school, church, peer group, and television. And then we gave you 1980. Home was still number 1, peer group in the number 2 position, television 3, school dropped down to number 4, church last on the list. Let's go back to my statement. My statement said that only men can make boys men. Now let's see where black boys are going to find men. Let's first of all look at his home. 62% of all black children live in a single-run household. It's a very good chance he would not find a man here. I'm going to hold off on the streets and drop down to television. Can you name me 5 positive adult black men on television outside the news? And you can't name Cosby because the show just started. Name me 5.
Outside the news?
Outside the news.
Jefferson.
And you better not say George Jefferson. So they find very few black male role models on television. Now let's drop down to the schools. 83% of all elementary school teachers are women. 95% of all teacher aides are women. And when do men teach? After the critical 4th grade, or they're in the upper grade, or they're the PE teacher, the janitor, or the principal. Very few before the 4th grade where black boys need them the most. And lastly, the church. Most young people, men, don't go to church. And the reason is we lied to them. First of all, we made Jesus Christ white. The man surely was not white. And we have a book called What Color Was Jesus to explain that. He had hair the texture of wool and feet the color of bronze. But secondly, the Lord's Prayer says on earth as it is in heaven. Young people and men want some action. They want some programs. If there are no programs in your church, they will see you later in heaven. As a result of not finding a man at home, few on television, few in school, and not wishing to attend church, the last place is the streets. And that's the problem. The streets do a very poor job making men.
Let us take a quick examination of some of the methods, the strategy employed by white liberals to harness and exploit the political potential energies of the so-called Negro in America. The crooked politicians in Washington, D.C. always make a big noise over the proposed civil rights legislation. by blowing up the civil rights issue. This lends stature to the Negro civil rights leaders for the benefit of the white politicians who pose as liberals and who pose as the friend of the Negro. The white liberals control the Negroes and the Negro vote by controlling the Negro civil rights leaders. As long as they control the Negro civil rights leaders, they can also control and contain the Negro struggle. They can control the Negro so-called revolt. And I must point out right here, there's no such thing as a Negro revolution. There's a black revolution, but not a Negro revolution. Who ever heard of a nonviolent revolution? Who ever heard of a peaceful revolution? Who ever heard of revolutionaries standing up like chumps with locked arms singing, "We shall overcome"? Who ever heard of a revolution based on a desegregated lunch counter and a desegregated theater and a desegregated public park and a desegregated toilet, which they call public accommodation? Revolutions are based on land, and they are brought about by the landless against the landlord. The Negro Revolution is controlled by white liberals. That's the Negro Revolution is controlled by white liberals. It's controlled by the government. But the Black Revolution is controlled by God. This man of God cannot be controlled in any way by the white man. And he will not compromise in any way with the wrongs that this government has inflicted upon our people. The Negro Revolt is a backfire. It's controlled by the white man. The Negro Revolt is controlled by the government. The leaders of the Negro Revolt, the so-called Negro civil rights leaders, are subsidized, influenced, and controlled by white liberals. And all of the demonstrations that are taking place in this country for desegregated lunch counters, theaters, public toilets, are just artificial fires that have been instigated by white liberals, and is being called the Negro Revolt in hope that they can use it to fight off the real black revolution that has already swept through Asia and swept through Africa and is getting started in Latin America and is now manifesting itself here in this country. Can we prove what we say? Can we prove that the Negro Revolt is controlled by white liberals? Yes. Right after the Birmingham explosion, right after the police dogs, the police clubs, and the fire hoses last May, the New York Times on May the 15th, on page 26, reported President Kennedy and his brother Robert Kennedy, two gentlemen whom I'm certain all of you are familiar, after a luncheon with several newspaper editors from the state of Alabama, some of their Democratic colleagues, or I should say Democrat colleagues, the Times reported the president as warning these editors that they must give at least some token gains to the moderate Negro leaders in order to enhance the image of these moderate Negro leaders in the eyesight of the black masses. Otherwise, he warned, the masses of Negroes might turn to the direction of Negro extremists. And he named the black Muslims as being foremost among these Negro extremists. So he tried to get them to build up the image of the moderate Negro leader, what he called or termed the responsible Negro leader. And whenever you hear a white man refer to a Negro leader as a responsible Negro leader, he means a Negro leader who's responsible to him.
That's right.
In essence, the president was admitting to these Southern editors that he was trying to build up the weak image of the Negro civil rights leaders in order to offset the strong religious image of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He wasn't giving these Negro leaders anything that they deserved, but he was admitting the necessity of building them up and propping them up in order to hold the masses of black people in check, keep them in his grasp and under his control. The president knew that once the Negroes follow the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, once they're exposed to his doctrine, the white liberal can never influence Negroes or control those Negroes or use those Negroes for the political benefit of white liberals any longer. Dr. Martin Luther King's image had been shattered the previous year when he failed to bring about desegregation in Albany, Georgia. The other Negro civil rights leaders had also become fallen idols. The masses of black people across the country at the local level had begun to lead themselves and to take their cases to the streets on their own. The government in Washington knew that something had to be done to get the Negroes back into the corral, back under the control of the white liberal. The government immediately began to put out the propaganda, encouraging Negroes to follow only what it called responsible Negro leadership. And as I said, by responsible Negro leaders, the government actually meant Negro leaders who were responsible to the government and who could therefore be controlled by the government. The government knows that Mr. Muhammad is responsible only to God and can be controlled only by God. Last May, right after the police dogs, fire hoses, and police clubs, the Birmingham Negroes exploded. They rioted. They erupted. And during the many long weeks when the police dogs and clubs and water hoses were brutalizing Negro women and Negro children and Negro babies, and the Negroes Negro leaders had called for a federal intervention of troops by the president sat on his hands, saying there was nothing he could do. But when the Negroes erupted in self-defense, the president then sent in federal troops, not to defend Negroes, but to defend the whites against whom the Negroes had finally erupted. There are many of you who may get a little indignant at what I say about the president, but it's a matter of record. As long as the dogs were biting black children, as long as the dogs were biting black women, as long as the dogs were biting black babies, and the Negro leaders cried to Washington, D.C. for the intervention of federal troops, the president, one of your fellow city citizens, told them there was no law on the statute books that he could use to intervene. But when black people erupted and started taking the heads of white people, the troops arrived the next morning. At that point, all over the country, spontaneous demonstrations began to take place. Negroes began to talk about how they were going to march on Washington and tie up the Senate and tie up the Congress and tie up the White House, how they were going to lay their bodies across the runway at the airport and stop the airplanes from taking off or from landing, bring all traffic to a halt. And as much as this president travels by plane, he really would have been in bad shape. This frightened the government. It frightened the white power structure in Washington, D.C. The president called in the Negro civil rights leaders and told them to bring this thing to a stop. They had gone far enough. They were deviating from the script. But the Negro civil rights leaders told the president they couldn't stop it because they didn't start it. They couldn't bring it to a halt. They weren't even leading it. It's spontaneous. It's at the grassroots level. It's in the hands of the masses. It's in the streets. It has no leadership whatsoever. That was why it was so militant. When the president saw that he couldn't stop it, He joined it. He endorsed it. He welcomed it. He became a part of it. And it was he who put the 6 Negro civil rights leaders at the head of it. It was he who made them the Big 6. How did he do it? How did he gain control of the March on Washington? A study of his strategy will give you a glimpse of the political genius of the family that now rules the country from the White House and how they use the Negro to do it. The president endorsed the march. That should have been the tip-off. A few days after he endorsed it, in New York City, at the Carlisle Hotel, a hotel which I think if you investigate you'll find belongs to that illustrious family, a philanthropic society called the Taconic Foundation, headed by a white man, a white liberal named Stephen Currier, called a meeting of the 6 civil rights leaders in an effort to bring about unity of action and unity of purpose among all the civil rights groups. These 6 civil rights groups were shown how they were destroying themselves by divisions and by attacks upon each other. And it was suggested that since most of their divisions stemmed from their competition for funds from white liberals, they should unite their fundraising efforts. If you check the paper, you'll find that right after the Birmingham explosion, Martin Luther King began to run all over the country participating in fundraising rallies. And Roy Wilkins accused him of starting trouble and expecting the NAACP to get him out and pay the bills while they run all over the country and took all the money. And it caused a lot of friction. So this white liberal, they knew it. And they brought these 6 Negro leaders together and talked to them, told them, don't rock the boat. They formed the Council for United Civil Rights Leadership for fundraising purposes. They chose as chairman of this council the Urban League's Whitney Young and Stephen Currier, the white liberal, as co-chairman. It took this white liberal to bring all the 6 Negro civil rights groups together. It took this white liberal to unite these 6 into one group. And then he let them select their own chairman, but he himself became co-chairman, which placed him and the Taconic Foundation in position to exercise influence and control over the civil rights leaders, and through them, control over the entire Negro civil rights movement, plus the March on Washington. According to the New York Times, dated August 4th, 1963, $800,000 was split up between these 6 Negro civil rights organizations on June the 19th. And another $700,000 was promised after the march. Public relations experts were made available to them immediately. They were given access to the news media across the country, and the press immediately began to project the Big 6 as the leaders of the March on Washington. As soon as they became looked upon in the public eye as being in control of the march, as being leaders of the march, as being the organizers of the march, and inseparable from the march image, their next step was to invite 4 white liberals to become a part of the Godhead, or group of leaders who would ultimately okay all plans and therefore thereby completely control the march. These 4 white liberals, Walter Reuther, a Jewish rabbi, a priest, and a pastor from Protestants, represented the same factions that had put the president in Washington, D.C. Catholic liberals, Protestant liberals, Jewish liberals, and labor. When the president had learned that he couldn't stop the march, he joined it and got all his friends to join it. This is the way the white liberals took over the March on Washington. This is the way they weakened its impact and changed its course. By changing the participants, by changing the contents, they were able to change the very nature of the march itself.
A person can be proud to be black. To me, black is a beautiful color. And within this black, you have so many different groovy shades, of brown and tans and what have you.
Black people have finally come about this means of being proud to be black, a feeling of being righteous black. The word black itself has become an upstanding word, and we accept it now, the word black. As of one time, we didn't accept black because white America made everything black seem foul, black angels, black lies, everything black to us was, it was taboo, it was no good. But now we have become, gained knowledge of ourselves, and black is part of us. This is known as identity, being identified as black. This is the reasons for the naturals and the Afro-American styles that we have picked up and that we have gained knowledge of. This was our customs, and to identify with oneself, he must be known as black. You are black. You are a black man. You are a black woman. You are a black child. It's no. Well, that's the trouble with black people. They don't know who they are.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Carl T. Rowan. As the new director of the United States Information Agency, I have the privilege to present to you a dramatic document of man's continuing search for dignity. It is a film about the great Civil Rights March in Washington, a moving exercise of one of the most cherished rights in a free society, the right of peaceful protest. I believe that this demonstration of both whites and Negroes, supported by the federal government and by both President Johnson and the late President Kennedy, is a profound example of the procedures unfettered men use to broaden the horizons of freedom and deepen the meaning of personal liberty.
Freedom Now movement, hear me. We are requesting all citizens to move into Washington, to go by plane, by car, bus, any way that you can get there. Walk if necessary. We are pushing for jobs, housing, desegregated schools. This is an urgent request. Please join. Go to Washington.
Negroes want the same things that white citizens possess. All of their rights. They want no reservations. They want complete equality, social, economic, and political. And no force under the sun can stem and block and stop this civil rights revolution which is now underway.
On August 28, 1963, 200,000 Americans came to Washington to demand complete freedom for everyone. This is the story of that day.
Then probably then we could integrate. Yeah! Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on, hold on.
Los Angeles and San Francisco, or about the distance from Moscow to Bombay. They came from Cleveland, from Chicago, or about the distance from Buenos Aires to Rio de Janeiro. They came from Jackson, Mississippi, from Birmingham, Alabama, or about the distance from Johannesburg to Dar es Salaam. By the end of August 1963, in some places of the United States, a Negro could not go to school where he chose, eat where he wished, build his home where it pleased him, or find jobs for which he was qualified. He had been insulted, beaten, jailed, drenched with water, chased by dogs. But he was coming to Washington, he said, to swallow up hatred and love, to overcome violence by peaceful protest. Many people predicted violence. Negro groups trained themselves to overwhelm it. Armed with portable two-way radios, volunteers scattered throughout the march would keep watch. Should violence come then that day, they would call for help. Each man would have a code name. Freedom, equality, justice, jobs.
This is Freedom 2 to Equality 1. This is Freedom 2 to Equality.
The Constitution of the United States guarantees every American the right to protest peaceably. 200,000 Americans then were going to use this right.
When Martin Luther King failed to desegregate Albany, Georgia, the civil rights struggle in America reached its low point. King became bankrupt almost as a leader. Plus, even financially, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference was in financial trouble. Plus, it was in trouble, period, with the people when they failed to desegregate Albany, Georgia. Other Negro civil rights leaders of so-called national stature became fallen idols. As they became fallen idols, began to lose their prestige and influence, local Negro leaders began to stir up the masses. In Cambridge, Maryland, Gloria Richardson. In Danville, Virginia, and other parts of the country, local leaders began to stir up our people at the grassroots level. This was never done by these Negroes whom you recognize of national stature. They controlled you, but they never incited you or excited you. They controlled you. They contained you. They kept you on the plantation. As soon as King failed in Birmingham, Negroes took to the streets. King got out and went out to California to a big rally and raised about, I don't know how many thousands of dollars. Come to Detroit and had a march and raised some more thousands of dollars. And recall, right after that, Wilkins attacked King, accused King and the Corps of starting trouble everywhere and then making the NAACP get him out of jail and spend a lot of money, and then he accused King and Corps of raising all the money and not paying it back. This happened. I got it in documented evidence in the newspaper. Roy started attacking King, and King started attacking Roy, and Farmer started attacking both of them. And as these Negroes of national stature began to attack each other, they began to lose their control of the Negro masses. And Negroes was out there in the streets. They was talking about, we're going to march on Washington. By the way, and right at that time, Birmingham had exploded, and the Negroes in Birmingham, remember, they also exploded. They began to stab the crackers in the back and bust them upside the head. Yes, they did. That's when Kennedy sent in the troops down in Birmingham. So, and right after that, Kennedy got on the television and said, this is a moral issue. That's when he said he's going to put out a civil rights bill. And when he mentioned civil rights bill and the Southern crackers started talking about they were going to boycott it or filibuster it, then the Negroes started talking about what? We're going to march on Washington, march on the Senate, march on the White House, march on the Congress, and tie it up, bring it to a halt. Don't let the government proceed. They even said they was going to go out to the airport and lay down on the runway and don't let no airplanes land. I'm telling you what they said. That was revolution. That was revolution. That was the black revolution. It was the grassroots out there in the street. Scared the white man to death. Scared the white power structure in Washington, D.C. to death. I was there. When they found out that this black steamroller was going to come down on the Capitol, they called in Wilkins. They called in Randolph. They called in these national Negro leaders that you respect and told them, call it off. Kennedy said, look, y'all letting this thing go too far. And old Tom said, boss, I can't stop it because I didn't start it. I'm telling you what they said. They said I'm not even in it, much less at the head of it. They said these Negroes are doing things on their own. They're running ahead of us. And that old shrewd fox, he said, well, if you all aren't in it, I'll put you in it. I'll put you at the head of it. I'll endorse it. I'll welcome it. I'll help it. I'll join it. A matter of hours went by. They had a meeting at the Carlisle Hotel in New York City. The Carlisle Hotel is owned by the Kennedy family. That's the hotel Kennedy spent the night at 2 nights ago. Belongs to his family. A philanthropic society headed by a white man named Stephen Currier called all the top civil rights leaders together at the Carlisle Hotel and told them that by you all fighting each other, you're destroying the civil rights movement. And since you're fighting over money from white liberals, let us set up what's known as the Council for United Civil Rights Leadership. Let's form this council, and all the civil rights organizations will belong to it. And we'll use it for fundraising purposes. Let me show you how tricky the white man is. And as soon as they got it formed, they elected Whitney Young as the chairman. And who you think became the co-chairman? Stephen Currier, the white man. A millionaire. Powell was talking about it down at the Cobo today. This is what he was talking about. Powell knows it happened. Randolph knows it happened. Wilkins knows it happened. King knows it happened. Every one of that so-called Big Six. They know what happened. Once they formed it, with the white man over it, he promised them and gave them $800,000 to split up between the Big Six, and told them that after the march was over, they'd give them $700,000 more. $1.5 million split up between leaders that you've been following, going to jail for, crying crocodile tears for. And they've nothing but Frank James and Jesse James and brothers. Soon as they got the setup organized, the white men made available to them top public relations experts. Opened the news media across the country at their disposal. And then they began to project these Big Six as the leaders of the march. Originally, they weren't even in the march. You was talking this march talk on Hastings Street. Is Hastings Street still here? On Hastings Street. You was talking the march talk on Lenox Avenue. And down on, Fillmore Street. And Central Avenue. And 42nd Street and 63rd Street. That's where the march talk was being talked. But the white man put the Big Six ahead of it. Made them the march. They became the march. They took it over. And the first move they made after they took it over, they invited Walter Reuther, a white man. They invited a priest, a rabbi, and an old white preacher. Yes, an old white preacher. The same white element that put Kennedy in power. Labor, the Catholics, the Jews, and liberal Protestants. Same clique that put Kennedy in power joined the March on Washington. It's just like when you got some coffee that's too black, which means it's too strong, too black, too strong, too black, too strong.
All these increasingly shittier jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it. Good, honest, hard-working people continue to elect these rich cocksuckers who don't give a fuck about them. They don't give a fuck. 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 They don't want people who are smart enough to sit around the kitchen table and figure out how badly they're getting fucked by a system that threw them overboard 30 fucking years ago. Politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. As long as it's bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls, they got the judges in their back pocket. And they own all the big media companies, so they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They got you by the balls. They don't want people who are smart enough to sit around the kitchen table and figure out how badly they're getting fucked by a system that threw them overboard 30 fucking years ago. They don't give a fuck. give a fuck. Because the owners of this country know the truth. It's called the American dream, but you have to be asleep to believe it.
That Huey P. Newton be set free. So in defense of our lives, for the survival of black people and human beings of the world, we all say in solidarity that Huey P. Newton must be set free or the sky is the limit around the world.
A part of America's culture. It is as American as cherry pie.
Against all forms of racist
power means dignity. See, it's no in between. You're either free or you're a slave. There's no such thing as second-class citizenship. The only politics in this country that's relevant to black people today is the politics of revolution.
That we must arm ourselves, that we are in imminent danger, that the concentration camps in Tule Lake, in Arizona, and Oklahoma are now being rejuvenated, reset up for us, and we will defend ourselves.
I don't believe in guerrilla warfare. I think it would be both impractical, ineffective, and immoral. So I can't believe in this at all. I think we must see, on the other hand, however, that the young militants are in the revolutionary spirit, and they are concerned about revolutionizing certain values that have been existing in our society that need to be revolutionized. And I think the other thing that we must see is that, as President Kennedy said, those who make peaceful revolution impossible only make violent revolution inevitable.
Because when we start saying the war is wrong in Vietnam, well, people looked at us like we were something out of space. But when they talked about the other day of the Gallup poll being 58% of the people against the war in Vietnam, then we see if you're right, you have to stand on that principle, and if it's necessary to die on the principle, because I am sick of the racist war in Vietnam when we don't have justice in the United States.
They're a bloody good bunch of killers.
We're going to commit troops to the Vietnamese people, the National Liberation Front, to fight the cowardly American aggressor. And the Black Panther Party. That's right.
The question is whether our nation has the will, and I submit that if we can spend $35 billion a year to fight an ill-considered war in Vietnam and $20 billion to put a man on the moon,
our nation can spend billions of dollars to put God's children on their own 2 feet right here on earth.
I'm going to make this known at the Paris peace talks so that it can be accepted or rejected by the Vietnamese people. But in the spirit of internationalism and the spirit of international solidarity, we plan to do this, and we would do this for any people who are fighting against American imperialism.
I've heard several comments from people that was talking about with the people, for the people, and by the people. Being a black woman from Mississippi, I've learned that long ago that's not true. It's with a handful, for a handful, by a handful. But we're going to change that, baby. We're going to change that because we're going to make democracy a reality for all of the people of this country.
And I say that that is a great need now for a radical reordering of priorities in America, and that is a great need for a revolution of values.
The Reverend Jesse Jackson, a protege of the late Dr. King, challenged the Reagan administration on affirmative action and other social justice issues.
Reagan won when we were asleep. He won by the margin of despair.
He had the swagger and he didn't wear a suit and tie. He had a big fro. So I said, that's the kind of preacher I want to be. Because he never pastored the church. He used to say the whole country is my pulpit.
When these efforts started to show a little bit of success, that's when the government moved in.
CONTOPRA was the code word for counterintelligence program, and it was a program that the FBI created in 1956 to go after the Communist Party with intentions of trying to neutralize the party, put it out of business.
In 1967, they start what became known as MH Chaos, a code word for illegal domestic operations within the United States.
We can say that the CONTOPRA was a kind of codification for white supremacy in America, because the function of the FBI was to preserve white political, social, economic supremacy in America.
Counterintelligence staff under James Angleton was not the only CIA office which was involved in illegal operations within the United States and with the general attempt to get information on the foreign hand in the protest movement. The Office of Security was another major effort by the CIA.
I've seen top secret documents from the White House authored by Nixon communicating with J. Edgar Hoover specifically about the Panthers.
Hoover had, well, if you want to call it an enemy list, had lists, but it's difficult to say what Nixon's men had. They pulled the Watergate, so I guess they could do just about anything.
The Black Panther Party was looked at as the #1 threat to the internal security of the United States of America. These are word-by-word, verbatim quotes from J. Edgar Hoover.
The year of '69, every branch and office of the Black Panther Party in one way, shape, fashion, form, or another was attacked by the power structure, law enforcement agencies, and so on.
And people walking around out there like walking wounded, you know. It's just like they've been in Vietnam. Victims of gun battles and sieges and isolation and torture and destroyed families and dead parents. But nobody knows about them and nobody really cares. And that story is one that hasn't been told yet.
At the University of California at Los Angeles, 2 Black Panthers were shot to death during a black students' meeting on the campus last Friday.
2 FBI informants in the United Slaves had shot and killed Bunchy Carter and John Huggins on the UCLA campus.
Us organization slapped a member of Black Panther Party at the time, Elaine Brown.
Was going with John Huggins, so when she told him that somebody from the US organization had slapped her, he pulled his pistol out. This is when the 2 brothers, supposedly Steiner brothers, supposedly steps out from behind the doors and open fire and kills John and kills Bunchy.
And the FBI agent who was controlling 2 informants was concerned that some white students might have been shot on campus.
The members of the US organization were taken from the crime scene with the FBI.
The government or whoever, power, COINTEL, whatever, they were able to kill a party when they killed Bunchy. When they killed Bunchy, they killed the party. We just didn't know it.
I think it was April 1st, 1969. We were taken down to the Manhattan District Attorney's office in the wee hours of the morning, after having been roused from bed by teams of machine gun-toting policemen. Gene Roberts had the dubious distinction of having been Malcolm X's bodyguard when he was assassinated. He was one of the major agents in the Panther 21 case.
They brought us all in and put us in one room. They brought Ralph White Sedan, the other undercover agent, with his sawed-off shotgun, and they brought him in with his head down like he's under arrest, took him in another room, and they had Gene Robbins sitting in another office, sitting down, looking like he was depressed, like he was arrested.
And it was down there that we realized that there were 3 undercover agents that were actively involved in framing us for the charges for which we were arrested.
After they get the conspiracy charges on you, they let the agents out the side door, and they go back out in the community as nothing's wrong, or they were still Panthers when they wasn't Panthers at all. They were just agents that infiltrated the Black Panther Party.
Most of the Panther 21 spent 2 years in prison. After a trial that lasted 15 months, a jury came back with a not guilty verdict in 45 minutes on all 150 counts of conspiracy. It was a colossal victory to have defeated the state's attempt to criminalize the leadership of the Black Panther Party.
I may be poor, but I am somebody. I may be on welfare, but I am somebody. I may be in jail, but I am somebody. I am a somebody. I am a somebody who keep hope alive. I am a somebody. I don't rightly know who the hell I am, but I am somebody.
Very important to understand. We hate cops beating black people over their heads and murdering them. That's what we hate. If you got enough energy to sit down and hate a white person just because of the color of his skin, you're wasting a lot of energy. You better take that same energy and put it in some motion out there and start dealing with those oppressive conditions, and you're going to find out just what you hate and what you're going to stop.
It's been 50 years since War's album, The World is a Ghetto, was released. The album, known for songs like Low Rider, came at a time when the music industry was still largely segregated. War's music spread messages of inclusion and activism across generations, having a profound influence on America's culture today with songs like Why Can't We Be Friends? Take a listen.
Waiting for the CIA, they wouldn't have you in the fire.
We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over. And I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
They won't bleed me. Excuse me, buddy, but excuse me, lady, but you fooling, ain't you? Where can I be? This ain't America, is it? Oh Lord, where can I be? This ain't America, is it? No, this ain't America. You can't fool me. This here's the home of the sheriff, not the land of the free. In America, folks don't run through the streets, blood streaming from where they've been beat. And the parks are for the people. And the cops in the good old USA don't think they're some kind of guys either. No, this ain't America. You can't fool me. If you don't spit the right image, they just pull out there the EDED. If they just don't like the way you look, they just law and order and tricks, just trip, name and frame and blame, just legislate and club away, and just laugh louder and louder. No, this ain't America. You can't fool me. No, this ain't America. You can't fool me.
Ethical human experiments conducted on mostly black prisoners at Holmesburg Prison. This prison was known as the Terror Dome. During its heyday, it was a source of extreme violence. It is now inactive. But between the 1950s and the 1970s, it was the site of horrid experimentation conducted by a University of Pennsylvania faculty member. Approximately 300 men were exposed to herpes, fungus, asbestos.
Back in 1967, I came to Holmesburg Prison. I was a young kid, and my family didn't have a lot of money to be sending me for commissary and stuff like that. So you had to find your way to make it in jail. So I ran into some friends of mine that got me transferred over to H block, is where they had all the tests. And on that block, the horror of living started for me. And like you said, it was a radiation study. It put circles on your back, and the radiation would take your skin down to the white meat. And then they would put some kind of salves on it to bring it back. When they brought it back to the color of my original skin, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep on my back. And it went on for about maybe 6 or 7 months. I never got comfortable with it. And when you talk about the metabolic study, that was a study where they gave you pills with foreign organisms in it, and they took me off of H block and took me to the hospital block along with other inmates, and you was observed for about 3 or 4 days to see what kind of changes you would go through. The changes for me didn't happen at Holmesburg Prison. They happened after I got out. The other tests that I took was on my forearm. They would put they would take a needle and shoot some kind of stuff under my skin that made it blister. And once it blistered, they would take these shears and cut that skin off and put it in jars and would put salve on your arm to kind of make you comfortable. One of the other tests that I took was when they made 4 incisions on the left side of my body, on my ribs, and they sewed me up with different materials, like red material, blue material, gray material. And that material was for the hospitals. Like in the operating room where you've seen all white, well, they were using other colors, and they wanted to see if a person would get infected from these colors on the operating room. So they used us for that. So I never got infected. Nothing went wrong, no more than the 4 cuts on the side. And another test that I took was a milkshake study, where you didn't get no food. They just gave you a waffle and a milkshake for about 30 days. They wanted to see if they could contain your weight. When I went away, as a result of the Holmesburg ride, they transferred me to another prison. And that's when I started to feel effects, which I didn't know at the time, from all them tests that I took, especially the metabolic tests. I started to have nightmares. It got so bad that within that time period, between 1970 and 71, all the way up until about 2005, I went to 3 different mental institutions. And what they told me, I was bipolar. But I knew it was more than that bothering me. As a result of meeting Miss Jones, I was having nightmares for over 35, 40 years, and I didn't know where it was coming from. It changed my whole personality. I turned on my family. I turned on my kids. I turned on my wife, which I lost, and thank God I got them back. But I paid a price. It was like living in a horror story. To regurgitate this is very painful for me. So please excuse me.
So no apology necessary.
I didn't know at the time what this stuff was. I almost made the mistake of taking an LSD test study. What turned me around from that is that when I went to apply for it, it had a note on the door, please wait out to lunch. So I stood there and waited for this person to come back. But in the process of doing that, this guy came up on me, and I was only 23 years old. And he said, young buck, don't take this test. And when I looked him in the face, his eyes was going left to right, and it scared me half to death. And I didn't take it. But from all over the years, I have reoccurrences, nightmares with this stuff. I never went out to get mental help, but as a result of that, I've got help for my drug and alcohol. The drugs and alcohol kept me out of the horror of what I went through. It was like it was more comfortable being high than being in reality.
Faith was counted as righteousness for a peculiar people of praise, for whom the Bible was both plumbline and community anchor. They finally believed that they knew how the bird flying high felt. Freedom was a new song, and its lyrics were inspiring and encouraged all those who aspire to sing it to do so boldly. Those who were not born free and or indigenous got their first experience with freedom by being liberated from the physical chains of the antebellum South. As both reward and recompense, these newly northbound blacks brought with them a reconnection to their ancient, divine lineage by way of their unfailing faith in the Messiah, a faith that broke through the spiritual bondage of their ancestral Babylonian chains, and this pleased the Heavenly Father of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. As their determined bronze faces reflected the bright visage of the glory of their Creator, naturally, they began to create. They created soulful businesses and neighborhoods which became hidden national jewels, emanating rays of joy and positivity throughout otherwise infected major U.S. cities. In a relatively short period of time, many black families went from slaves and victims of abject poverty in the dirt-poor rural country to merchants and business owners, becoming employers in their own right. They did so by stepping out on faith. From out of this faith was born scripturally promised blessings, which blossomed like a tropical wildflower. It bloomed into historic Harlem in its heyday in the 1920s, the historic Black Bottom District in Detroit through to the 1950s, the historic Greenwood Black Wall Street of Tulsa, during its prosperous years prior to its destruction by white mobs in 1920, and also many other thriving black communities of the pre-civil rights era in America. Each community rose like a Holy Spirit pillar of fire, springing up from out of strong faith in God's promises and belief in the Bible as God's Word. Unlike today, the foundation of the modest, God-loving community-based church was usually at the root of the prosperity within that community. As these neighborhoods thrived off of self-sufficiency and reciprocity, as Scripture advises, each seemed to take heavenly wings and appear to soar up and away on an apparent course to continued growth, prosperity, and generational financial security. But alas, once again, a dream deferred. Bitter and resentful racist groups, and in some cases entire towns, band together to stop what some perceived as a threat, the progress of this people in particular. The idea of them actually quote-unquote overcoming is a great offense to those who benefit from and capitalize upon this Luciferian system, commonly misnamed the white power structure. And once this threat was realized, it was almost as if an ominous grand theater curtain could be seen, slowly, methodically, and menacingly closing over the scene. Its left drape is being pulled closed by a white hand, representative of the prejudice and racism that has erased these landmark black cities from history and memory, while the right drape is being pulled closed by the withered, petrified hand of a black man, symbolic of how our own brothers savagely sabotage their own communities now without need for much interference from intelligence agencies. The programmed members of your hood are the source of its destruction today. Let this teaching serve as an explanation for how did we get here, and why have we been unable to recreate this phenomena of having our own prosperous communities in the same way today. Prayerfully, those who have eyes will see, recognize, and rectify. Today we say that we cannot even unify, the primary reason being lack of faith and leaving the Bible and the church in droves, to look for some imaginary new and better pathway to God. Though not a monolith, we can sadly say that as a people, we've largely left the old church and the old God who looked upon it behind, citing its imperfections as our sorry excuse to lazily assimilate into secularity, as we mindlessly do as we will, sinning unto death in a deadly land without our inherited heavenly covering.
My favorite record that I listen to now is Marian Anderson, who is the world's first black contralto. I listen to her every morning. She wakes me up and gives me inspiration to start the day. She sings a song, "Oh, rest in the Lord, wait patiently for Him, and He will give you your heart's desire, and He will give you your heart's desire."
Religion is deeply ingrained in you.
Deeply ingrained.
All religions,
all religions.
I don't believe
in
religion.
I don't
Interest
believe.
in religion.
I don't believe in any one religion. No, I don't believe in any one religion. I believe in Allah. I believe in the Hindu religion because I studied yoga for 21 years. I believe in Buddhism. I believe in all of them because they're necessary for the sheep, darling. The sheep have to have something to follow, and religion is necessary. I believe in all of them.
The ghetto has more liquor stores than they have Baptist churches. There's a liquor store on every corner in the ghetto practically, and the liquor stores inflict the greatest amount of pain to the community. A black individual is entirely different from a white individual because life on the street in the ghetto is always it can be very deadly, you know, because there's certain things you have to be aware of. The main target of life on the street is money. This is the main target of life on the street. This is where your hustling more or less comes in, plays a big part, because you learn how to hustle at a young age, because there isn't too much money in the home. Hustling is a means of support, of making money, of getting what you want. Church it's a hustle itself. It's a way of hustling on the people. In fact, it's a damn good hustle, you know. And as a matter of fact, it might even be the biggest hustle of all. If you find a Baptist minister that's just starting out with anything to serve as a church, let him tell you any place is God's house, any house is God's house. So a church can be anything, but it just so happens that they went on a main street maybe, or a main street where there once was a store and there isn't a store anymore, where they can lease this building out and it can become a church with a few changes and add a cross to it and put the name up and you have a church.
All during the week we look forward to Sunday. Sunday is an important day in my life. And I stay at church all day long, from 9:30 until around 3, and then come back and go back at 6:30 until around 11. And then I have a full day. Sunday is the only full day I have. I think church has meant an awful lot to me. It's kept me out of trouble. I've never been in jail. I've never had to be stopped about anything. Just knowing about church and knowing about the Word of God, it's been my whole life since I've been grown. It's meant everything to me. It's been my mother when my mother wasn't around, my father. It just, I think it made me all around see things different than other people.
Soul is all through the ghetto. Soul is all through the ghetto. The ghetto itself is sometimes known as Soulville or Soul Town.
If I didn't believe in God, and if I wasn't a strong believer in God as I am, I don't think that I could really survive down here on earth with the conditions like they are, and the main thing is living and getting along with the white man. It's a problem here. You have to really be a believer. You have to pray. You have to ask God for your strength, your courage, and everything to get along with the white man. Because if it wasn't for God, I don't think I could survive.
We thank God for these young people. Because as you know, there are so many other places they could be. And so many other things they could be doing. But they chose to be in the house of the Lord today. And truly we thank God for them.
Lord, if that's me right now.
Well, church meant to my family that I brought all my children up in the church. And it's meant a lot to them. I've never had one to go to jail. I've never had one in juvenile. I think knowing what it is and being taught the right way kept them out of anything. They know if anything anybody tell them, they already know it because I've taught it to them and then had the teachings of the church behind me.
My mother sent me to church. You know, I went to church too. She would dress me up. I even had a suit that I just wore to church. You know, this was church. Every Sunday was a sacred day. Nothing else to do on Sunday but go to church. Well, church to me was, I didn't like it. I didn't like sitting up in that hot room for hours listening to what this fella had to say, who was jiving all the time. I knew he was jiving. And as I got older, I had big ideas. I saw through this fella up there, you know. Now I believe in myself. I believe if anything is going to be accomplished, it's going to be myself. I can sit down and pray all night for a job. I can sit down and pray all night for anything that I happen to want. And praying ain't going to get you nothing. It ain't going to bring you nothing. When you look up on the walls in the church, well, what you see is this white man. You don't see anybody that identifies with black people. This man has blue eyes, he has blonde hair, he is the white man. This is what you see. And this is the way America has made it. You know, this is the way America has made their God to be. Like them, you know, like white people. But this is white people's God. So naturally you're supposed to identify with them.
I don't need Jesus because Jesus hasn't done anything for me. If he had done something for me, he would have created us all equal. He would have put our people where we wouldn't have to be struggling for something all the time and begging and asking for somebody to give us something. If it was a Jesus, how come he didn't He didn't make everybody one color. How come you got our people begging? How come you got our people, had our people in slavery for most of the time? See, that's why I believe that there's no Jesus. There's no Jesus. Jesus is just something that the white man led the black man to believe in. And now that the black people are now aggressing the way they are, they know who they are, and they all know that they are God. And I think that I am God. In fact, I know I'm God, because God is somebody that can do what he wants to do, and I'm going to do what I want to do.
I don't knock anyone's religion because, you know, however you find God, that's a fantastic thing. I think, you know, the people that are reading the Quran and people that are reading the Bible are really reading about the same person. And people in religion are hypocrites. So I sought out religion to say, okay, maybe I'm not a Christian. Let me see, maybe I'm, you know, God body. Right? Okay. Maybe I'm Buddhist. Okay. Maybe I'm Muslim. So I got a bit of, and then realized, oh, I'm just a spiritual person. Because if you walk into any one of these places, you walk into a mosque, a church, a thing, it's an altar. That's constant. There's God, there's an altar. You know what I'm saying? Like, so, okay. That's what aligned for me and my spirit and my soul was I'm a spiritual person. I don't know everything that's out there, and I'm fine with that. You know what I'm saying? I know God exists, and I'm cool with that.
Let's start with Jay-Z. He had one of those super verses, right, where you get to go as long as you want. What did you think? Because that's when I realized, oh, this is not going to be a God-focused album. That's just the name. Because it sounded like Lil Wayne was trying to stick to that topic. Ross was trying to stick to that topic. And then Jay-Z was just like, I did it.
Think about it. Religion has actually convinced people that there's an invisible man living in the sky who watches everything you do every minute of every day. And the invisible man has a special list of 10 things he does not want you to do. And if you do any of these 10 things, he has a special place full of fire and smoke and burning and torture and anguish where he will send you to live and suffer and burn and choke and scream and cry forever and ever till the end of time. But he loves you. Loves you. He loves you and he needs money. He always needs money. He's all powerful, all perfect, all knowing, and all wise. Somehow just can't handle money. Religion takes in billions of dollars. They pay no taxes and they always need a little more. Now, you talk about a good bullshit story. Holy shit. Thank you. But, thank you very much. But I want you to know something. This is sincere. I want you to know, when it comes to believing in God, I really tried. I really tried. I tried to believe that there is a God who created each of us in his own image and likeness, loves us very much, and keeps a close eye on things. I really tried to believe that, but I gotta tell you, the longer you live, the more you look around, the more you realize something is fucked up. Something is wrong here. War, disease, death, destruction, hunger, filth, poverty, torture, crime, corruption, and the ice-capades. Something is definitely wrong. This is not good work. If this is the best God can do, I am not impressed.
It's the most derived. For whatever reason, I think that if Christianity had been any other religion, Christianity is the most mocked religion. Like, we want to look at religions with respect and dignity. Whether it's Islam or Hinduism, we look at those with respect and dignity. And even if they have practices that we don't agree with, we sort of give them this leeway that it's a part of their religion.
Yeah,
Christianity is the most openly, easily mocked of all religions. It's the most derived. You are at the whim of the priests. And Martin Luther came along and said, actually, what God said, like, you should probably interpret it yourself.
That was Joe Rogan talking about the Protestant Reformation, which empowered people to read the Bible for themselves. And here's the response from his guest, Jim Gaffigan.
It is amazing how consistently the messages and the teachings of Jesus are like humans can't grasp it. Like, they're like way off. Like, oh, we're supposed to take care of the poor. We're supposed to help the needy. We're supposed to do all this. And people are like, does that mean I should get another car?
I don't know what your reaction is to that, but as someone who claims to be a follower of Jesus, I take this challenge seriously.
And I'm talking about people that, embrace the Christian faith.
Yes.
Like, get it wrong. I'm not talking about people like, I don't believe in that stuff.
Right. People who proclaim to be Christian.
So do you and I just claim to follow Christ, or do we actually follow him?
In 1915, on Thanksgiving of 1915, at Stone Mountain Park in Georgia, there was a rally held, and it was by a Methodist preacher. Let me repeat that: a Methodist preacher named William Joseph Simmons, and he inaugurated there were several iterations, but the modern day version of the Ku Klux Klan. And this Methodist preacher did that with a group of white men around him, a burning cross on one side, and a Bible open to Romans chapter 12 on the other. And I give you this example because this is just one example in the history of America of how this peculiar relationship of how white supremacy and Christianity have become intertwined.
So my colleague, Dr. Vince Bantu, talked about this last year, but Constantine and Christianity being the official religion of Rome kind of made Christian this concept, synonymous with this concept of whiteness. And I can't explain it as eloquently as Dr. Bantu, but I think that's one aspect. But I think in America, obviously, pictures of white Jesus, when we do the Is Christianity a White Man's Religion on HBCUs, we always play viral videos that connect with the audience. And one video that we play is Muhammad Ali doing an interview, and he's talking about when we get to heaven, are we going to be the servants in heaven? Because he equated Christianity with whiteness and in a tool of oppression. And as we see in slavery, using scriptures to justify slavery. So I think, obviously, going back, if you want to go back to Constantine, but I think also in America, white Jesus, slave owners using scripture to oppress, furthers this narrative that Christianity is a white man's religion.
Bishop Omer.
I think, let me come at it another way. He who tells the story owns the story. So I think let's start at who owned and who told the story. They told the story from their perspective and selectively edited it. Very meticulously, they left out revelations in the very Bible that they said they used. I mean, I'm 74 years old, and I was 30 years old. Grew up in a black church with the white mosaics of pictures of Jesus. I was 30 years old before anyone told me that there were black people in the Bible. And I had always sat under not only black preachers, but black educated preachers who never told me because they passed on the story as they had heard it. And frighteningly so, many of them had even gone to schools of color. And so they modeled for us what to put in and what to leave out. So in the sense of them telling the story, I think they did own it. You know, how can you go? A couple of years ago, my wife and I went to Fiji, to a mountain village, 230 some people, down a river, up in the mountains. They lived in the mountains, the whole village. And they came down to meet us, and they escort us back to the top of this hill. We go to this village, and 200 some people. In the middle of the village was a church. And when you walk into that church, the first thing you see in this village of chocolate people was the vanilla Jesus. Because he who tells the story owns the story.
Dr. Waters.
Sure. First, I want to thank you for the privilege of being here and engaging in this dialogue. I know Dr. Antipas Harris has a book of this title and has done research here. But I also found very helpful an article in the Gospel Coalition by Claude Otko, where he answers a question by addressing three primary reasons why Christianity can be perceived or is perceived by some as a white person's religion. One is the history of oppression present in the religion. The second is the whitewashing of Jesus. And the third is what he calls apathy in the church towards racial justice. To your point, I brought some things I would like to share very briefly. I collect artifacts from our nation's history, and you summarize it well. It was in November of 1915 where William Joseph Simmons climbed atop Stone Mountain, Georgia, with those men and built an altar, right? And said he heard the angels of heaven rejoicing as they built that altar to erect the second generation of the Ku Klux Klan. This is an authentic Ku Klux Klan hood from that second rise. But when you investigate their wares, this is the robe. What do you see prominently displayed? The cross is central. Now, interestingly enough, that red drop of blood in the middle of the cross is not the blood of Jesus, but it's the blood of the white man, and the blood that they perceive that they have shed in order to create this nation. That's just one aspect. I just got back from Charleston, South Carolina. I'm an Emerson Collective Fellow, and I'm researching a gentleman by the name of W.W. Wilbur, who was a slave seller in Charleston, South Carolina. For those who don't know, Charleston, South Carolina, as a port, was responsible for 40 to 50% of all black people entering this country in chains. These are the literal chains. You saw them featured in the documentary that appeared beforehand. These are the literal chains of W.W. Wilbur. If you read them, it says W.W. Wilbur, slave seller on one side, 1806. On the other side, it says strong, healthy African Negroes. Lot number 32. The reason this is important is because in 1845, W.W. Wilbur is a part of a conversation with slave sellers from across the state of South Carolina in terms of how they would use Christianity amongst the enslaved. They're establishing the rules of order for what is appropriate in teaching slaves about Jesus. And in those minutes, they make it very clear that you should not say anything or allow any reading that will inspire liberation. As a matter of fact, a white person must be present to prove all that is shared in that space. One final thing I want to share with you here, because I think this is important. This is an authentic lynching postcard. If you look on the face of this, you see the depiction of a black man hanging by his neck. These were popularized during the 20th century. Mass-produced images of Black death. The importance of this postcard is when we know when did most public lynchings happen. Most public lynchings happen on Sunday. So white worshipers left worship to kill black people. Matter of fact, there's a film called The Same. Came out in 2019, and they asked a gentleman from the South in that film if he knows of any of his white neighbors who still have the body parts of lynching victims preserved in their homes. It's in 2019. And he refuses to answer the question as to not incriminate his neighbors. That's the history of oppression. When you move beyond the history of oppression, right, to the whitewashing of Jesus, we have to talk about an aspect of our history which is understudied, which is the Naturalization Act of 1790, where America literally says that whiteness is a prerequisite to citizenship. So when people say this is a white person's country, historically they're not wrong. It's not until 1868 with the 14th Amendment that black people are brought into the conversation. 1924 that indigenous people are brought into the conversation. 1954 that Asian American people are brought into the conversation for citizenship. But the reason that's important in 1790 is up to that time, Puritan understandings of depictions of the divine permeate America, meaning that you don't have any artistic depictions of Christ. But around the time of this Naturalization Act, you all of a sudden see the emergence of the white Jesus. The white Jesus is to give endorsement to citizenship, basically creating God in your own image and determining who could be welcomed to the American enterprise. And then finally, we talk about apathy. I don't know that there's any more racist organization in the world than white Christian evangelicalism. I don't know if there's any more racist institution. Because the persons who worship there then go out to enact harms in our legislatures, in the mass incarceration in our country, and in so many other spaces. And so if you're looking for an image of Christ that is welcoming and embracing of all, but that is the image that you see, ultimately you see a white supremacist God.